like if you're arguing about the dishes, right? It's not about the dishes. It's about like, I feel like you don't respect me, and it goes all the way back to childhood because you felt like you couldn't earn your dad's respect, or something like that.
No, that is 25%, isn't it? 3 months?
Yeah, but no, by the
No,
end of
we're like
March.
end
But
of March, yeah.
that's just a classic thing people say every year. Like,
The
I
start
can't
of the year goes by so quick.
Yeah, but also the end of the year, and I can't believe it's already June. We're halfway through, and then November. Oh, I can't believe how quickly this year's gone. Like every single year.
Do you reckon every year though? Because then that would be like, we'll be like 80 years old and we'll be like, oh, shit, that went by quick. Or maybe that is what happens.
No, I think people just say that, and it's
Oh,
like, is
yeah.
this actually true? It's just like a thing that people say.
That's fair
Actually,
enough.
that really annoyed me last year that people were, because I had so much I still wanted to do before the end of the year, and people like, playing Christmas music in November, like, oh, this
Yeah, yeah,
year's
yeah.
already finished. Like, no, it's not. We've still got a whole month.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, well, I was going to introduce you to say, well, to tell the audience, the beautiful people listening right now, that if they want to hear about your growing up story, they can go back and find
Yeah,
that episode.
yeah.
Um, and that also, yeah, we did the cancelled podcast. I wonder, because I never check that, I wonder if anyone's randomly listening to that or
I
finds it.
I reckon that if you went back to remember we did the one on J.K. Rowling? I would love to go back and listen to that one again. Because have you
How
seen,
come?
well, have you seen the thing that has just recently happened, maybe in like the last week or 2 weeks, with
No.
there's a Harry Potter video game that's been released on Xbox, PlayStation, probably computer as well, and it's had a lot of hype around it. And they've made one of the characters in it, like the game developers have made one of the characters trans. So
And
it's just,
what's that got to do with?
oh, because we spoke about how J.K. Rowling had been tweeting that stuff about trans people. And now these game developers are like trolling her by taking her Harry Potter story and they've added a trans character to it.
Huh. Is it because they're trolling her, or do
I
they just want to do that?
That's just the way I see. I mean, I've only heard about this through the grapevine, so that was my take on it. I
Oh,
consume so much news and content.
do you really?
Oh, now that I've got a Twitter, everything on Twitter is like a news headline. I can't keep up as either because I follow these. I follow news channels like newspapers and TV news channels and things like that. But then I also follow these other, I guess they're online news websites that just continuously do like breaking news, breaking news, breaking news, like story after story after story, and it's hard to keep up with all of the news that's coming through. Like,
But is it,
did you see that yesterday North Korea shot a missile into the ocean near Japan?
no, I didn't.
Pretty scary, I guess, if you live in Japan.
Huh.
But it's heaps of
Yeah,
news.
interesting. I feel like this is not an interesting conversation. I feel like this is not interesting for anyone to hear, and I feel like I've said this so many times, but my only news consumption is I listen to the FT news briefing,
Yeah.
and it just have like the three bigger. So if it's not big enough news to be affecting markets, I guess. Oh no, they have other news. As in, like, obviously what's happening in Turkey, I am aware of that. But then if
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like some random mass shooting or something, I'm not going to hear about it. And I
It's not
think
in
that's
there. Yeah.
actually, unless it's some big thing. But also, sorry, it's only Monday to Friday
How long does it go for?
that's on. So then maybe I'll hear about the North Korea thing on Monday.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
10 minutes. And then I
Yeah.
listen to the Economist news briefing as well sometimes. But I feel like it's read out by an AI person. Like, I don't know if it's an actual, and that kind of
Maybe
puts me off.
I sometimes you can listen to a lot of like news apps. You can just hit play and then it just an AI reads out the story,
Yeah, yeah.
which is
Um,
kind of cool.
but no, I don't like it.
I've
FT is not Filipino, so I don't like it listening to a computer.
I've been taking long news articles and then putting them into Chat GPT and saying summarize this in bullet points.
Interesting. And does it do a good job?
I mean, I would need to read the story and then read what the bullet points are, but I'd say it probably gets like 60-70% of the gist of the story in like 4 or 5 bullet points, and then you're like, huh, cool. And it kind of takes a bit of the spin out of it too, I think. Maybe not.
Mm.
But speaking
Well,
of news, what were you going to say?
Well, I was gonna say, because now I'm working at a hedge fund, it's like people who are trading constantly, there are just TVs everywhere
Yeah.
with every different news channel on. But again, it's more like I think I'm very happy to avoid a lot of this sense because on the Twitter stuff, aren't you just dragged into stuff that is just it's like what you taught me from the Cancel podcast when I was like, oh, but this headline's saying this. And you were like, yeah, that's to sell newspapers. Or like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just to create division. And then now I kind of, yeah, I'm just allergic to those stories that are, when you see it's just trying to make you feel in a certain way.
But
It's not delivering.
don't you also kind of love that sometimes as well, even if you know that that's what they're trying
No.
to do? It's like watching
Oh,
wrestling or like a soap opera. You're like, I know exactly what emotions you're trying to trigger.
yeah, but there's other stuff I'd rather do with my time,
That's fair
I
enough.
think. And yeah, because now, like, I'm so glad we did that cancelled podcast, but now I have no interest. Like, I don't know if you could tell by me with the JK Rowling video
Oh
game thing.
yeah.
Like, I just have no interest in that stuff at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in the culture war stuff, I'm just like, no. Which I guess is what this podcast is. I'm just hearing from people about their
Yeah. Yeah.
lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's funny because then having potentially controversial people on, or not controversial, but people who might have been in the media and articles might have been written about them. And then I'm like, yeah, but I'm getting to hear not what a journalist says about them. It's like what they actually say about
Mm,
themselves
mm.
and like judge their character for myself, which I guess is a very um, privileged position to be in. I mean, assuming people continue to agree speaking to me on this platform.
I'm sure they would.
And then it's like, cool, we're just humans. Cause like anything can be taken. Yeah, because the media is just selling stories, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or also, yeah, it's selling stories or like there's some I don't know. There's a slant that's being put on it for some reason or another to influence public perception, influence the crowd. Um,
But I thought you
Mm?
you said after that podcast we did, or I don't know if you were just saying this, because basically we'd go in and just disagree with each other.
Or try to. The conversation could get really stuck sometimes.
Yeah.
because
And
because I was just memorizing things I'd seen, like news in the form of a meme, but then you also had like really well printed out notes.
yeah, but then you criticize me for them always being from The Economist, which I don't think was even true. Anyway, but no, but then afterwards, which I feel like this happens to me. Well, maybe do you have the same personality as me in this? That I just feel like if people are talking about an issue, I always want to take the opposing view. Like
Mm,
I thought of this with Jacinda Ardern or something like that.
yeah,
If people are criticizing her, then I'll just want to say like something positive or something, it's just like devil's advocate
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Whereas on the
yeah,
other conversation, if people are praising her, I'll just be like, what are you talking about? And like pull out all the, but, and then I don't know if you were saying that with our podcast that you were kind of doing that. And then afterwards you're like, well, I don't actually agree. Because when you keep doing that, you're like, well, I don't even know what my real thoughts are.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then maybe that's a good thing because your thoughts should be nuanced. Like there's always lots of different ways to argue something
Yeah, that's
or
true.
parts of the argument.
That's true. Yeah.
But then you were like, this is now on record as if you have that view.
And then millions of people will go back and listen to it. People who
Yeah.
crave new content.
Well, but it's not new content, it's outdated.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's why I feel with that it's like, oh, who cares? Yeah, I thought that a year ago. Like I'm a totally different person to who I was a year ago.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Not in a, yeah, just like your thoughts can evolve.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like what if yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I was just
Or
thinking,
it's like I've learnt so much since then.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that definitely can happen as well. Or like, yeah, new information comes to hand and then it changes your view of something.
Yeah.
But
But
oh, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say, but generally, I think I'm just too sensitive to do. I've just been steering clear of those debate. Oh, actually, probably, yeah, probably since we were in India together and I got caught in intense debate. I honestly, I think since then, I'm just like, no, you taught me that. You like, you've got to pick your battles. And I think I'm getting so much better at like, I just can't be bothered
Yeah,
talking about like especially when you can sense it's going to get emotional, it's like just not, I'm like it's just so much more interesting to learn about, I don't know, to learn about people in a calm way.
that was like if you think back on like that, the intense debate when we were hiking down that like gorge, and it was about
Yeah,
Greta Thunberg. If you think back on
yeah.
that situation now, it's like super random. Like we were in the middle of like the Himalayas, and it was like a stand-up comedian arguing with like a podcaster about Greta Thunberg. Like,
But no, but it's so funny.
but like yelling. It was like an intense debate about like I can't even remember what it was about.
But well, no, because then it was about like mental
Yeah, yeah,
health and
yeah, yeah.
and because that's the thing, like whenever you're arguing with someone, and I think this is what I mean, this is me reading a lot of psychology and philosophy at the moment, but it's like or thinking a lot. That makes me sound way smarter than I am just thinking about this stuff. Or yeah, that when you're having these arguments with anyone, like in a relationship as well, especially, you're not arguing with like some like if you're arguing about the dishes, right? It's not about the dishes. It's about like, I feel like you don't respect me, and it goes all the way back to childhood because you felt like you couldn't earn your dad's respect, or something like that. It's always like way more. It's way deeper,
Yeah, yep, yep.
and so when it gets emotionally charged, or yeah, because even some of um the dads on the trip, the older
Oh
men on the
yeah, they were
trip,
getting
them having those, yeah, super passionate debates about politics,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
not just about, it's something way deeper. It's something like, when I grew up, I didn't have these opportunities because X, Y, and Z. Or, it's like, or when, me in that argument about mental health, it's like all to do with losing my brother, or what, it's like nothing to do with Greta
no,
Thunberg.
no. That triggered it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. But it's also then like, how do we let ourselves spiral into an argument that gets to that level? Well, I guess you'd have some understanding of why from what you've been thinking about and reading about.
Yeah, well, now I think that's what I've been, because that would have been me with you on the podcast, being like, oh, getting so pissed off at you of like, you don't understand. It's nothing to do with the argument. It's me being like, I feel like you're not listening to me, like, fuck you kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
But, and then I think it's like exactly what you taught me. It's just like mindfulness helps with that, like just like being more emotionally stable. Because then, and identifying the trigger, like if you are really triggered by something, it's like, why? What's this really about?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and going deeper into it. And yeah, obviously this stuff happens with family all the time.
Well, yeah,
It's like
I've
you
been
can trigger each other so much.
I've been thinking about it with like families. Yeah, definitely happens. But because I've been playing cricket again, just like local like park cricket, and seeing people like lose their like absolutely lose their shit, and then you realize it's because like, oh, like they went out and they're like embarrassed that they went out, or you know what I mean. Like, I've been thinking that when I've been playing, like seeing people, everyone's there just for like recreational fun, but people get super heated and like really like lose their like, yeah, like lose the plot. um like someone was crying the other day because they lost their wicket, and I was like, whoa, like there's something deep, deep. Well, maybe you've taught me that. I was like, something deep is going on right now.
Wow. Oh my god.
And also I've been like, like I meditate, try and practice mindfulness in my everyday life, and then I'll go out and play like a really stupid shot just because I'm not like concentrating. And I'm like, wow, like why did I do that? Now I don't get to do anything for the rest of the day. I just um, sit in like a chair in the shade watching my teammates have fun because they haven't gone out yet. And like I know as soon as I've gone out, I'm like, why did I do that? Like just lost all control of my body.
But then you get to come back next
Well,
week.
that's true. That's true. But I'm gonna actually try to like do like a some kind of meditation before I get to the game, just to like really be thoughtful and see if it makes a difference.
Yeah, or visualization. All the sports visualization stuff,
Yeah, okay. I'll
which
actually. What is that?
apparently part of that, well, you know how athletes use visualization to help their performance?
Okay. Yep.
And
Yep.
then people try and apply that to wider areas of life. It's super interesting. So what you and there's like I feel like I've talked about that here. Nova. Wait, sorry. Before I go into this, can I just say, when you said the person crying playing cricket
Yeah.
reminded me of in New York, when I lived in New York, I joined this like kickball league, or my friends made a kickball team. and we'd play these kickball matches after work, and people took it so like kickball, it's not even a real sport. People took it so seriously that they would be I remember we were playing against these hedge fund guys who were so intense, and a guy got like red carded, like taken out of the match because he was abusing the umpire so much, and it's like, guys, this isn't even a real sport.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like it's something. Maybe because you're like running around and your adrenaline's pumping and like I don't know if you're for whatever reason like can't deal with like losing a game or you think that I don't yeah, it's super weird, not weird
But yeah,
but
so
I'm sure yeah something deeper is going on.
yeah, well, it can also just be like emotional regulation, right? When it's like you don't know how to control that stuff. But when you think about performance, um, it's so interesting. Yeah, that's also the reason I love tennis, right? Because you get to see so much of what's going on in their psyche.
Yeah, yeah,
But with the visualization, it's not you know how people like visualize like you're gonna get a Ferrari and then like it will appear.
yeah, yeah,
So and then from sport, it's like visualization helping performance. But how you like translate, oh, this is what I heard the other day. It's like how you translate that to real life. You're not like visualizing is, oh, fuck, I wish I could remember the examples. But, oh, no, yeah, there's one of like Michael Phelps played it over and over in his head. What happens if like every situation, so it's like my goggles come off or like this bad thing happens, you're you are preparing mentally for every type of situation. And then in one event, his goggles did come off, but then he still won the gold medal or, whatever.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like prepared or skiers do it like visualizing every part of the course. But you're not just visualizing like the trophy at the end, apparently that is I feel like that is part of it. Like Novak from when he was 4 made like a fake Wimbledon trophy and just like visualized that that would be it.
yeah,
But you're visualizing like all the hard work. So it's like, okay, if you want a Ferrari, it's like, what are you doing to get it? And then you're visualizing yourself just like slogging it in the office or whatever it is.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't know, or like sacrificing the thing. So the thing for cricket is like go and visualize like um staying focused on every single ball or like being like because I guess if there's a slip in focus and then you go out, it's too late. So it's something
yeah,
like
yeah.
noticing yourself getting tired, but I don't know, something like that.
No, I think
Yeah,
it's
for feeling the heat, feeling like the exhaustion, and mentally preparing yourself for it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
then if you care that much, you're probably just the same as the guys who are crying after going out because you're taking it really seriously.
uh, but yeah, how do we get onto that? Oh, talking about arguing and debating. I did think of something where it was like and it's related to listening to news on podcasts. I'd been listening to the occasional podcast by this guy called Ezra Klein. He's a journalist for I think it's the New York Times. And then my dad sent like this article about that Ezra Klein had written about productivity in the construction industry, and it was basically him just saying like, "What's going on? Like the construction industry is so bad. Like it's not productive at all. Blah blah blah." And then I was like writing back to, even though it was like my dad didn't write the article and had no, he just sent it to me because he just saw that it said construction, and I was like, this article's bullshit. Like he's missed out that like there's codes that people need to build to and that like those codes have gotten like and there's health and safety for the people on site and for the people bringing things to site and the people building things, and like I was like and those codes have improved, like he was comparing it back to the seven anyway. put all this shit in this like message, and I was getting really fired up. And then I was like, why am I why am I arguing with my dad didn't even reply. I think he just did like a thumbs up like reaction on the message. And I was like, why am I like arguing with this journalist who like obviously like I could have gone on Twitter and like wrote I actually all the comments in the article were people who like felt the same as me, and they were like explaining why they thought it was bullshit. But then um, like a week or two later, there was those terrible earthquakes, and then you could see all these buildings just turn to rubble. And now it's turned out that like there were heaps and heaps of developers who were getting buildings built that weren't up to code. So then I was going to be like, what? And then I sent it to Dad, and I was like, oh, that's what I was going on about. That like there are like safety codes and like regulations in how you build something so that if there is a disaster, it doesn't fall over. And then I felt like I was like, oh, maybe I should tweet that to this guy. But then he probably gets like thousands of tweets a week. I don't think I've
Yeah, but
tweeted anyway. If I've tweeted you, I've just tagged you in things before, but I don't think I've actually tweeted.
yeah, I've kind of stopped looking at it lately. But yeah, but I think that's exactly where it can be a good forum. Yeah, that's what it would be. It's like, oh, you have thoughts on this, and then finding people who are actually have something, um, well thought out to say, and hopefully you can find those people on somewhere like Twitter, um, where then you can have that conversation, and it doesn't have to be Ezra replying to you, but sometimes like Andrew Huberman replies to so many comments and has conversations with people. But so maybe I don't know, it just depends if he's actually interested in engaging with his audience.
Yeah,
But even
yeah.
if you're just having a conversation, like you end up having a conversation with someone really interesting in the industry, that actually, yeah, because I heard like a few people who have Twitter friends or who have internet friends from just chatting about. And I think that comes from being interested in a niche. Um, but yeah, you could end up this could be a future business partner who you meet in the comments.
Yeah, true, true. Um, but that would be. I haven't heard of that Twitter friends. I can see it though. People used to have pen pals. People probably still do have pen pals.
Yeah. But they actually hang out in real life as well. Or people, yeah, will travel and be like, oh, I'm meeting this person who in this other country who I know from Twitter. Or yeah, Twitter or whatever the other ones
And
are. There's a whole
it
world
would
out there
be,
on the internet that
yeah,
I'm not really
yeah,
part of.
it would be interesting if
Although
people
I
had,
do want to get more.
you want to get more what?
Go on.
I was going to
I
say
do
if
want.
people,
That's what I've been saying on this podcast, and I said it. It was interesting. I said it in one we recorded last week, Brian and I, but it hasn't posted yet. Where I was like, I love hearing from people. Like that's what gets me. That's what motivates me. Like so much more than any numbers, because numbers don't really mean anything. But it's when people verbally say or whatever, send me a message or whatever it is, something about the podcast, or I hear that someone then talked to the person who was the whatever that open conversation. That's like the most motivating thing. Um, and also to then continue to make content that people are actually interested in. Because I'm super aware now. No, now we're chatting. But at the start, I'm like, Julie, no one gives a fuck about what news you listen to. And also, it makes me sound like I'm really uninformed, which I don't like. Oh, sorry. I also read newsletters.
you read
So just
newsletters,
want to
how
add
many,
that.
how
So,
many, how many newsletters are you subscriber to?
well, I read, I think there's this CEO Daily one from Fortune that's quite, oh, sorry, from fuck, what's it called? Yeah, from Fortune. That is quite good. That I read every day, and then I read the Daily Stoic newsletter for
Oh
some
yeah.
Stoic vibes. And then I don't know. I sign up to them, and then I signed up to one that was like unbiased news. It was like we want to cut through like all the bias, which I think is more like a US thing of like Fox versus CNN. But then I realized really quickly like what they choose to report on really clearly demonstrates what their bias
Oh,
is,
so
right?
that so they were biased anyway.
Not well, because it's like you can't not be biased, right?
When you're talking about the news, you
Yeah.
could just report on it like it was like a year two saying what they saw.
But no, but I'm saying what topics you choose to say, because there's so much you can talk about, right? And they can't possibly cover every possible news story. Like,
Yeah,
that's where the
yeah, that's
bias
true.
comes about, like, how is that news? And that's why I'm getting more dismissive with, like, a lot of the culture war stuff that I'm just like,
Yeah,
I'm not. Like, why is this news? This is a made up thing. Like the video game thing. I'm just like, no,
yeah,
protect that.
that's true. Well,
Is
that
that
was,
even true?
well, that was like that, like not culture wars, but this morning I was watching ABC and just the news on breakfast, whatever it's called, and they had their like cultural critic come on, and then all they spoke about was a reality TV show that's on Netflix, and then a new Marvel movie called Ant-Man 3. And I was like, wow, like this is like, surely they could talk about a book or something. Like, if ABC is like kind of the more higher brow level of news in this country, and they're talking about Ant-Man 3, they're like cultural critic. I was like, this is bad. Like, we're, I guess that just shows that that's like probably the two most popular things that people are watching at the moment. So they're like, well, that's what people want. So we'll give a critique about it. It wasn't like, oh, this new, like, I don't know, even a documentary has come out. It was just like, oh, yep, Netflix. Like, I was like, far out. Like, surely they could find something more interesting to talk about.
Hmm.
Like Ant-Man 3.
I
Have you seen any of the other two Ant-Man movies?
uh, I'm not a big movie watcher, so no comment from me on the cultural section or on the that particular news outlet.
Yeah.
Um, wait, okay, yeah. So my point was that was my point that I do want to be. I'm excited to be like more engaged with this audience. Um, but that's why I was asking you. Oh yeah, and then after I put that out, even though the episode hasn't been published, then I ended up getting like lots of engagement this week, which
Oh,
is
cool.
really cool. So yeah, so that's my message to the listeners that feel free to um message me about the podcast at any point. Um but that's why I was asking you what you want, because it's an interesting thing, right? Like when I bring a guest on, they have their own audience. And so it's like it's about them, like it's nothing, it's just me like allowing them to tell their story. Um and then they share it with their audience. And then their audience is probably like that's the first time they're coming to this platform,
Yeah,
right?
yep, yep.
But then there are other people who just listen to every episode. So that's why I'm asking. It's like if there's something you want to talk about that you're like to share, or otherwise it's just like this will be listened to by people who listen to every episode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep, yeah,
Or
yeah.
no, the
No,
only
I
other
get
thing
you.
is unless
No.
unless the title jumps out at them. Oh, yeah, so they find the podcast through me, which is like a small amount of people because it's just whoever I interact with and tell them about the podcast.
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Oh, I want to listen to one. Which one?" And then they go based on the head on the title. Which, like, what would we be calling this podcast?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, I mean, I suppose we spoke about it last time, but it's the like sustainability in construction, and just how much it interests me. But it's something that's like I feel like it's so niche, like it's so specialized. I know that like Bill Gates writes about it in some of his books, and um, there's another book that I've recently got called the author's Vaclav Simil, I believe, and it's called like how the world really works. And he says the same thing, that even though we're decarbonizing our grids, we're still like using so much raw material to build things for people around the world. Like there's a kind of lack of understanding, I guess, from the general public about how difficult of a challenge it's going to be to like we just have to use less materials when we're building things, or like recycle a shitload more. But it's this really weird thing where everyone are kind of involved in these, like, because at the moment there are like mega projects being built across the world. Like in Victoria alone, there's a train being built from the city to the airport. There's going to be like a tunnel built that goes like loops the entire city. Have you heard of that one?
Isn't that the metro thing?
That's like, it's like another one that's about to start. It's like a tunnel that's going to start in Cheltenham and then go all the way up through to Doncaster and then up to the airport, then all the way around to the western suburbs to like Werribee, I'm pretty sure. Like it's huge. That would take like 2 hours just to drive that in your car. And they're going to tunnel underneath all those suburbs, like just like crazy. And that's just in one.
Wait, for
Yeah,
trains?
for trains. But I'm just saying, like, there are these like the projects are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and part of that's because there's more people, and then part of that's because the politicians who commit to them know that, like, if you cut the ribbon, if you say, hey, I built like a hospital or I built a school, like it's hard to knock anyone for doing that, right, politically. So the politicians keep making these bigger and bigger like plans, but all those projects we need to use like concrete, steel, etc., etc., etc. But we're still not like, I guess people are still waiting. That it's like someone's going to invent concrete that doesn't cause CO2 to go up into the atmosphere, or someone's going to invent a way to suck it back out. Like it still doesn't seem like it's just going to be really hard. And these projects like are being rolled out kind of feels like weekly. And we're only at the stage where we're like, oh, we'll try and like test on one part of this project, tracking the carbon footprint while we design it so we can reduce that carbon footprint. So it's like everyone knows it's a problem within the industry, but actually solving it is going to, it's going to mean that either we have to have a longer planning phase, or the government needs to bring in some kind of code or regulation that says there's going to be a carbon budget for the project. There has to be something like quite drastic that's going to like completely change how projects are done in order to kind of deal with it. Because the other thing is, all these
Yeah.
projects, like even if there was a carbon budget, like mega projects like famous, like what's the big one in London, Crossrail. Like Crossrail went years and years and years over, and it was millions and millions and millions of pounds over budget. So even if we had a carbon budget, how do we actually meet it? because we can't even meet our cost budget.
So I'm feeling really I'm feeling okay. I think I've always been like positive, problem solving, read all the stuff where people are. I think a lot of this is like a personality thing, your attitude towards these issues being solved, right? Like anyway, I'm just always positive about this stuff. But I'm even more positive. This isn't specific to construction, but now that I'm seeing what's going on in the funds management industry,
Mm,
it's and
mm.
like how that's affecting corporate. And yeah, this is what I was excited to tell you about. Although I'll try and do it here without butchering it too much. But basically, there's there's this idea of Article 8 funds where they take environmental, social, and governance considerations alongside earning return. And there's
Mm.
like all this pressure that's come down. So it's like, oh yeah, there's this task force for, what does it stand for? TCFD. Um,
Oh,
there's this reporting in the UK,
yeah.
task force on climate related financial disclosures. So basically, this is like sweeping through the whole industry, because where do companies get money? Like, how do companies work? They need money from somewhere. So they have equity and they have debt. And so the people who have that money, like that's coming from banks and coming from funds and whatever, right? So it's like pension funds. Like, where's the most money in the world? It's like pension funds have billions and trillions, and then they are invested in funds with like eventually get into
Yeah.
companies, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Through shares, through bonds, through whatever. And so those, like, pension funds have regulations, other asset managers have regulations. So for them to lend the money or for them to buy the shares, they then have to be engaging with the corporate, which means they have to be calling the corporate and being like, hey, what's your plan on, you know, carbon? Like, and then there's actually all this reporting on what's their carbon footprint.
Mm, mm.
There's scope 1 and scope 2. So it's like there's this regulation, they have to report it. And then so there's this whole massive booming industry now of of all these consultants who do,
Yeah.
because obviously in-house you're not going to calculate all of this stuff, like you pay someone else to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but and the nuance is coming out, like, because then there was like the whole fear of like it's box ticking and there was all the greenwashing and it's like not particularly helpful. But now it's really interesting of hearing case studies where it's you're engaging with for example, like a copper mine who they have to make, it's like, oh, copper's needed for this for electric cars, right? And then but the copper mine was using coal to power it.
Mm,
So
mm.
then they go into them and they're like, hey, guys, it's not great that you're using coal. Like, we have a view on this. What can you do about it? And it's like, can you use hydro? Like, we'd prefer, if you use hydro. And then they're like, okay, sure. But if we use hydro, that means we're actually putting a dam, cutting off, like, the biodiversity is massively affected. We're cutting off this indigenous group who that's where their water comes
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
like, blah, blah, blah. So it's like all this nuance is coming through, and then it's
It's
like
all these. It's the yeah. There's so many trade-offs as well, aren't there?
but it's like it seems way more helpful. It's like people figuring it out together, and it's engagement over exclusion, because you can't just how can you just put a blanket? Otherwise, like, we'd have to stop airlines tomorrow, because people are like, okay, oil and gas and like fossil fuels, and then but it's like, where do you draw the line, right? It's like, okay, well then
Mm, mm.
what about, and also if everyone just divests from that stuff, then someone else can just come in, and there's that argument as well,
Well,
right?
and this is like related, like it's obviously it's related, like talking about like the climate change um, and mitigating the effects of it. But if like you're a developer and you go to build a new office building that you're going to lease or get someone to lease for you, they were looking at the emissions of when that building is up and running for the next 50 years, which absolutely you should. And then it's like, oh, but shit, what about all the materials that are like go into building it? And then you go, okay, well, should we use concrete that might need to be repaired every 10 years, but it has a lower carbon footprint now? Or should we put in one that's going to last the whole 50 years, but it has a higher carbon footprint? Like that, there's so many different, as like you said, there's lots of nuance in it. But yeah, you definitely need to, everyone needs to collaborate. Everyone needs to be like work collectively because it's so, everything's so complex and like intertwined that not one team or one specialized group is going to have an understanding of like the entire impact.
Yeah, but it's already happening, that's my
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah,
It's, like,
yeah, yeah.
so ingrained, and because this is people who do not necessarily care at all about these considerations. They actually it's in their they have to do it to continue to manage this amount of money. It's just like their client, or for example, if you think of a fund, they're getting money from other people who have capital, so like pension funds, whatever. The clients need them to do this, or they might want them to because they care, but also they need them to because of this regulation
Yeah,
stuff. So
yeah.
then it just flows through, and then it's like flowing through the whole system. So I don't know. I'm just really not worried about it. Like there are so many millions of people working on solving these problems, and humans have always done pretty well at solving
Well, and
problems. The thing I'm
that
more worried about is like people like the thing that you brought up, the North Korea mishap. You know, it's like us just killing each other, which is a thing that humans seem to
seem to
not
do.
have solved how to not do that.
And then that's like one of the kind of potential risks of things of the climate, well, the world getting warmer, is that then there's going to be more food shortages, there's going to be more droughts, there's going to be more parts of the world where people can't live. So then there's going to be like more like more displaced people, and then they're going to move, like that's going to cause conflict. And it's I guess that's where it's like everything's kind of, it's such a complex problem. But I also agree with you that it is really exciting seeing the like inventive ways that people are coming up with to like avoid to avoid as much greenhouse gases going into the air, whether it's like a new regulation that means that people have, all these funds have to manage their like money differently or report on, like start tracking these things. To There was a thing that Bloomberg had on YouTube a couple weeks ago where they're showing like some of the world's first like carbon capture, and they're basically like these giant fans like sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere, and then they put it down and it gets like turned into rock, like some kind of calcite. Oh, what is it called? Anyway, it's like they're putting, like using some kind of chemical reaction, they're putting it back into like the back into the earth as rock, and you're like, shit, that's really really cool. So yeah, there's people all over the world like trying to solve the problem, which I think that's like, yeah, looking at it optimistically, that's like pretty awesome.
Yeah. But
Um,
then I think sometimes we miss the some of the most basic solutions we kind of miss. But which you're doing now with like the nappies for Priya.
yeah, that's, oh my god, yeah,
Reusable ones.
the reusable nappies, they're way easy to change at the moment, but I think I was telling you like the
They're really expensive. But
it's,
then what was wrong with the nappies when that we grew up, that they were just cloth nappies and they got washed? Like,
oh, this is basically it's the same principle, but I guess like now
but
it's got
why
like,
are they so expensive?
these ones have got like an insert, and like they've got like a designer pattern on the outside, and they're all made. It's like made from recycled material, etc., etc. But I think it gets harder when the baby starts eating like solid food, because at the moment she's just breastfed,
Mm.
which will be, yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
uh, it's still it's I'm sure everyone has these thoughts, but like it's still so funny, like looking at a baby and then thinking like every single person on the planet was like a helpless little baby at one point.
How often do you think that?
Like just all constantly. I'm like, wow, like this is like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like was a little baby. And they're like, oh, I've got to feed him and put him, make sure he gets to sleep. And now then he became the Terminator.
Yeah, so everyone required some amount of love, like a lot of love to survive. And
Yeah.
that's why we have those powerful attachment things, because without other humans, you can't survive. Like for ages, right? How many years?
Oh yeah, ages, ages.
Yeah, so it's like that's someone cared at least some amount.
I get,
Which is kind of weird when you think about it, like people who were abused or have like horrific
yeah,
childhoods. It's like, but
yeah,
they're still
yeah,
being fed. So I guess it's like maybe there's someone who really cares about them, but then
yeah,
there's someone else who's abusing.
yeah,
Or maybe the abuser can also be loving at some points or something.
yeah.
Okay, I don't know why I'm thinking about that. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up? I
just
feel like we got stuck in the planning phase of this conversation.
just that if anyone is interested in mega construction projects, and why they seem to go wrong all the time, there is a new book that's just come out. A Oxford professor, I think it's called like "Why Do Big Projects Go Wrong?" Something like that. Anyway, it's all over my LinkedIn feed at the moment. It looks really good. So when I've read that, I'll get back to you to have the science behind why all of these taxpayer funded projects go massively over budget.
Great. Yeah, please come back on and teach us all about it.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear that? That's my
Yes.
doorbell.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
See ya. Bye.
Good to chat. Thanks for
Bye.
coming on.
Likewise. Bye.